are going terribly for the West. And even though I'm probably going to be, and our quality of life is going to drop in the meantime, we live in poverty anyway, so fuck it. We might well enjoy it, right? That's my mindset because it's not good, not looking good for us. So this segment's called for CJ and Aaron. You have Emmanuel Macron and Lula directly rebukes Biden's foreign policy. Lula and Emmanuel Macron, the shit lib, directly rebuking the Biden administration foreign policy. So here's Emmanuel Macron. He said Europe must resist pressure to become America's follower, said Macron. And the subheadline said the great risk Europe faces is getting caught up in crises that are not ours. That this is a massive change in tune. And this is after he met with Xi Jinping. Biden administration getting showed up by China left and right. He meets with China and he comes back for the meeting like, man, I don't think we should listen to America no more. That boy G got a good pitch. Anyway, now let's get serious. And this is why I said the NATO left. I said not looking good for the NATO left. Because not only do you have Macron who's speaking out against NATO and Western influence over French politics, and I have to make this point: do not think that Emmanuel Macron is saying this because he's some sort of diplomat, that he's some sort of expert of geopolitics. You guys know why this is happening?
I think it has something to do with his own people are burning the fucking country down. Yeah.
That might be it.
Because unlike the left, Bernie Sanders industrial
it's all fun and games until they're burning down Blackout.
Yep. Absolutely. Because unlike the burning media industrial complex and MSNBC, what have we've been covering, CJ? We've been showing the anti-NATO protests in France that complete media blackout on not only just the corporate media, but the NATO left media. That's why I said it's not looking good for the NATO left because it's gonna be hard for them to keep covering this shit up. We did mean propaganda reports and all this stuff. CJ, how many videos have you seen for the TYT, Sam Cedar channel, David Doe talking about Lula's position on NATO? How many? How long do they keep?
No, because they're run with and look, this is the ultimate irony of the woke liberal media. They act as if Biden has united the world against Russia. No, he's united much of the white world against Russia, right? But a lot of the global South, a lot of the non-white world who doesn't like this country very much for very good reason, they're not on our side. And look, Macron, at this point, this guy really has no choice but to go which way the wind blows. I mean, he's really not in a position to push his country and his people any further, right?
He knows French history. He knows what can happen when those people get cranky.
Right, exactly. He knows he's already sort of pushed this as far as he can. And not only are there anti-NATO protests in France, but there are anti-austerity protests in France, and those are linked, even though we're doing most of the bankrolling. Look, the people of France don't want this shit. Nobody wants this. Nobody wants this except the war profiteers inside this country. And because this country is so fucking stupid, and Nick, as you have said before, we are the most propagandized people on earth. A lot of the morons in this country can be convinced that's what's good for Raytheon is good for them, right? But even those numbers are starting to shrink here in this country. Around the world, people don't want this shit. I'm sorry. The territorial integrity of Eastern Ukraine is not worth a nuclear throwdown. Most civilized people understand that. Most people who have a sense of what is at stake here, right? Civilization, right? Humanity. Most people do not want this. And so he is in a spot now where I think he has to pay that some mind.
Yeah, and I also want to show you guys this because this article is extremely interesting. Just for the sake of time in the article, I'm going to explain the most interesting parts. What he's advocating for is strategic autonomy. So separating from the West and having France be an intermediary, almost like a buffer state, being like, we are pro-China, we are pro-West, which is a direct rebuke of Biden's foreign policy. And guess what else he also said? And this is from Kabate, I always share a lot of his tweets on here. He mentions how we got to stay neutral on the issue of Taiwan. And he also mentions, is it in our interest to accelerate a crisis in Taiwan? No. This is Macron rebuking him on Ukraine, rebuking him on Taiwan. and rebuking them on relations with the Chinese people, who was the number one adversary of the United States. I ran out of guys, like they escalated guys. I did so many propaganda reports. How many anti-China segments I've done for CNN and MSNBC? You guys know how many I skipped recently? Because there's too many. They're cranking it up. Like there's more anti-China segments than ever.
Yeah.
I used to see one. I'm like, CJ, you see this shit? It's crazy. Now there's so many. I can't keep up. I can't keep up every time.
Caitlin Johnstone has been writing a lot about how in Australia they're being heavily propagandized to crank up their military spending to go up against China. Right. That's going to go nuclear. Okay, from the European point of view, or from the view of the rest of the world, going back to Bush, now their point of view is neoliberal, and it's not that they want to create some kind of utopia over there, but their alliance with America increasingly goes against their self-interest. Going back to Bush, their confidence that America could be relied on to lead this neoliberal Western alliance got shaky around Iraq. That was when they first saw, oh shit, America is becoming dangerous to our self-interest. They're starting to do things that are just not good for business. Then Obama came in there and they calmed down a little bit. Then Trump comes in and that pisses them off for completely different reasons. Now you got an American president questioning why we're paying for the defense of the NATO countries, why we have the trade deals that we have. So now they realize, oh shit, Americans could end up electing a president that starts a trade war with us and forces us to pay more for our own defense. And now, even under the party that we like, these guys are going and possibly starting World War III in our backyard for no good reason at all. So you've made the entire situation so unstable and dangerous and confusing and unpredictable that finally allies are starting to say, can we get away from this crazy motherfucker already? Because I don't want to see what's next.
Last thing on this story is not only Macron, as I mentioned earlier, it's Lula. And I always bring this back because we live in the United States, right? I always bring it back here. Why can't we get a member of the NATO left to say this? If you guys think I'm too hard on them, we got Emmanuel Macron, this neoliberal extraordinaire. Even he can say this. But AOC and Bernie can't. Here, Lula da Silva, the person they all congratulated when Lula won. AOC, all the NATO left was like, congratulations, Lula. Even though you have a complete 180 of foreign policy than we do, they all anti-China hawks. They all voted to send weapons to Ukraine. Sorry, not Ukraine's too, but Taiwan. Yeah, right.
So well, that's what I mean. I mean, it's a matter of people who have an investment in maintaining a human civilization, right? I mean, wherever you are in the world, I feel like here in this country, we just take for granted that the world can never really change in a dramatic way because we're an ocean away from most of the conflicts that go on. Like, there's not really a sense of what's at stake here in the U.S., at least not amongst a vast majority of people. Although now support for indefinite Ukraine war funding is actually below 50%, which is encouraging, right? Yeah. But look, I mean, I feel like in all these other countries around the world, there is a real sense of what can be lost, right? Whereas in this country, there really isn't. Like, people can't envision a world where the Applebee's isn't open. That's why the lockdowns were very, very traumatic to people, because it was real uncharted territory. Yeah. Whereas I feel like, you know, a country like Brazil, countries like South Africa, India, China, BRICS Alliance, I'm going through the list here. Yeah. They have a sense of like what can happen when shit actually goes down and gets bad. Whereas we just don't have that here. So there's a much longer sort of and slower learning curve in this country, where like our people are always the last to reject war because we're the most insulated from the consequences of war.
Charles Bukowski said it. The problem with these people is their cities have never been bombed.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah. Now, this is the last part of the story. This is Lula calling out the United States, EU, just like with Macron. This is a recent quote. At least a story from April 7th, at least. Brazilian president criticizes United States, EU for reluctance to seek peace solution for Ukraine. We believe that developed nations, particularly the European Union and the United States, should not have rushed to join the conflict so quickly without taking time for due negotiations. That's the statement from Lula. Meanwhile, AOC, Bernie, they voting for this shit. And meanwhile, during the election, when Lula won, these motherfuckers was retweeting Lula. Bernie was like, congratulations, Lula. Yep. AOC, all the NATO levels, like, oh my God, we love Lula. Then soon Lula took charge. They stopped paying attention to everything he said.
Right.
Well, and you remember the Progressive Caucus released that little mild statement.
Yeah.
And the next day they're like, well, it wasn't finished. And then by the next day, oh, that was a staffer. That was
the next day they never sent it, right?
They never sent it. They never meant to say that part.
And then don't forget, Nick, when Lula came to DC, they had to get their photo op to prove that they're somehow left as he, and he's not even really all that.
And then there was like, remember Jacob Ben wrote that embarrassing article that we covered that. Where it was like Lula meeting with Bernie Sanders is proof that the electoral strategy is success. And then Lula people was like, nigga, he meet with everybody, bro. Like, what y'all talking about? Every time he goes to a country, he meets with politicians in different coalitions. It's so pathetic